always making sure that whatever content you create adds value for your audience. The landscape is always changing. The algorithm is always changing. There's always a demand for more content and more content. And so if we have a connection to what we're putting out there, I think that that is what will help to create a long-standing digital brand.
What's that piece of advice that somebody gave you and it echoes most of the times in your mind?
One thing that my business coach told me a few years back, and this is when I was really struggling with burnout, and I think that my inner critic was very loud, and he said to me,
Jessica, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for taking your time. I know you're a very busy person. I would like to start this conversation maybe by diving a little bit into your journey. How did it happen to go from a psychology graduate becoming such a well-known content creator in this space?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here and connect with you and to be able to share a little bit about my journey. It's really interesting looking back because I have been on YouTube and online for 10 years now. It was actually my 10-year work anniversary in January of this year, and a lot has changed. If I could go back and tell my younger self that she was going to be a YouTube creator, I would have laughed at myself. I would have never believed it because it just wasn't a profession when I was growing up in school. I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to have a positive impact in my career and the work that I do. And I think that that's why initially my younger self was drawn to pursuing a career in psychology. And so I was studying a PhD in psychology, and I thought I had a 10-year plan paved out for me. I thought I would add on a clinical master's, I would work in the mental health field, and that was how I was going to make a positive impact. And I think when you are so rigid with your plans, we have this tendency to try and have our life all figured out. But when we do that, we actually close ourselves off to what can be some really amazing opportunities that very much align with who we are and our authentic self. And I think I was quite out of touch with who I actually was in my early 20s. And so late one night, I was sitting in my parents' kitchen, and it was the craziest experience I had had up until that point. But it was like a download moment where out of the blue, I just had this idea and this wave of passion came over me. And I knew in that moment, I wanted to be a positive role model and I wanted to be a YouTuber. I wanted to start a YouTube channel and create a channel that was dedicated towards helping students, not just to study smarter, but to protect their well-being and have better work-life balance, and a channel that would help young professionals to study, work, and live well, and be that go-to source of support that I wish I had when I was growing up and when I was a student, because I stressed unnecessarily. I put a lot of pressure on myself to get perfect grades, to have my whole life figured out, and I wish I had that extra support. It would have saved me a lot of grief, a lot of stress and pain, and also overwhelm. And so I remember the very next day, I went onto YouTube and I searched this YouTube channel name of Study With Jess, and it wasn't taken. So I registered the channel name and I took it as a sign. And then I started to create different scripts that I wanted to film, and I would write down ideas, and I would sit in my bed until 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was just so energized with inspiration and creativity just pouring out of me. And I remember filming my first few videos for YouTube. And I had worked with an editor at that time because I didn't know how to edit them yet. That was some skills that came a little bit later on. And so I had these videos, and then I realized I didn't even know how to upload them onto YouTube. And I searched on YouTube, how do you upload a video onto YouTube? And that was the start of my channel. And from there, it's brought on some incredible opportunities that I never expected to eventuate in this lifetime, and certainly not within my 20s or early 30s. Like you said, writing 2 books. I've co produced and directed 3 different web series. I've worked with global brands like Netflix, Adobe, Apple, Google, Asus, L'Oreal, and I've been able to reach millions of people globally and inspire them and motivate them and be that source of support that I initially envisioned myself to be back when I was sitting in my parents' kitchen late one evening and I had that idea.
It's incredible how much impact has had that moment, not just into your life, but into other people's lives. So we're very grateful that that happened. I would say must grateful of it. And I'm sure there were some downsides, right? You don't build an audience from day one. So how did you feed that resilience, right? To stay true to what you wanted to do despite the results, or maybe magically you had like a right away. Can you tell us a little bit that path?
Yeah, absolutely. So my channel didn't just start going viral from the very first video that I posted out. It was interesting though because I am a very impatient person. So for me, I would say that it took a long time for my channel to grow. But in reality, probably 3 months in, when it was that back to school time for a lot of students overseas in the States, around July, August, a lot of my content started to trend because students were searching for study tips and DIYs and organizational advice to get ready for a new school year. And that's when I really saw my channel start to take off, and my videos would get thousands of views, and my subscriber growth started to rapidly increase within just a very short time frame. And I think it took me probably 1 year to reach 100,000 subscribers. And then by 2 or 3 years into my journey on YouTube, I reached that 400,000 subscriber count. And so my community was really growing with me very quickly. But it definitely didn't feel like an overnight success. And if I look at my work and I look back at the last 10 years of my career online, I do believe that it's about consistent positive action, about creating a strong foundation and being that reliable source online where people know that they can come to you and find content that's going to give them value. And it's important to really connect with our why, the intention behind why we're doing what we're doing. Because in those moments of self doubt, or when we're feeling impatient, or when we're falling into that self comparison trap because we're looking at what other people are doing online and maybe their videos are getting more views, or maybe they're at a stage in their career that we aspire to be at already, we need to reconnect with our why and to be patient, to really back ourselves and believe in ourselves and just be consistent. And that's what I did. I was posting videos every week, at least once a week. There was a period of time where I was posting 3 videos on YouTube a week. And I now have over 500 videos on my channel. So things like book deals or getting funding for a web series or brand deals, that's because of the consistent positive action I've taken over time and because I haven't given up. And so I don't believe in failure, but I think that it's so common that people start to doubt in themselves and then they give up, and they give up too soon.
So that definitely you hit the nail there, because as I was looking into Study with Jess, it was very much giving me this very emotion that, oh my God, like I can do it, right? And this is something that it doesn't happen just with people that are in an entrepreneurial journey or study, but it's in a daily life situation. So I feel that there is something about you, Jessica, that like with such success on YouTube, there is a certain sensitivity in you where you truly communicate it somehow with that audience and try to understand what they want. Otherwise, I don't think like it would have taken the shape that it takes today. So what is that thing that like motivates you the most about the audience that you currently have and this community that has been built around you?
I think I feel a connection to my audience because I can relate to a lot of the struggles that they're going through, but also I draw a lot on my own life experiences and challenges. And then I take the life lessons that I've acquired in my own personal life and I put them out there. And when we're vulnerable, that allows us to connect with each other. We need to actually be open to sharing our own experiences and what has worked for us and what we've learned so that we can help others, so that we can inspire and motivate others. And I even see that in my own personal life, the way that the people that I surround myself with really empower me and encourage me to keep going and to dream big and dream out loud and go and achieve whatever goals I set out to achieve. And it reminds me of even the story of how I got my first book deal to write the high school survival guide, which was very much inspired by not only my struggles in high school as someone who stressed unnecessarily, put a lot of pressure on herself, and felt like I had to have it all figured out, but then reading a lot of the comments and getting these emails from my viewers about how they're feeling highly anxious or they're doubting their abilities or they're struggling and they've got all this pressure to amount to whatever it is that their parents expect them to be or these societal expectations that they're trying to live up to. All of those challenges, my own and theirs, really inspired this first book that I wrote. And I love to share the story about how the book actually came about because, again, it really emphasizes this importance of believing in oneself and to have people around us that encourage and empower us. But so I was on a flight to Queensland on a family holiday and I was sitting next to my mum. She was on the left of me. And at that time, I didn't really like flying because one of the recent flights I had been on with a friend of mine as we were traveling home from an overseas trip ended up being particularly turbulent. I won't go into
Oh,
detail, but it was
that's
quite scary. Everything was okay in the end. But I was still getting used to this idea of flying and that flying was safe. And so to pass the time, I took out my laptop, I opened up the tray table in front of me, and I opened up my laptop and I started to write what were the very first couple of blog posts for my website, studywithjess.com. And I think I must have been into the second blog post when I had this second download moment, quite similar to the first one when I had the idea to start my channel. And in that moment, I just turned to my mum to the left of me and I said, "Mum, I'm going to write a book." And she just looked back at me without hesitation and said, "I know you will." And what was crazy is that maybe 3 months later, I'm sitting in my home office at my big, beautiful white desk, and I've got my film set up behind me. I had this 12 cube storage unit and all these little decor items that I love to film in front of. And I take out my laptop to check my emails, and there's an email that stands out to me, and it reads, "Hi Jess, my name's Hugo. I'm the editor here at Mango Publishing Company. Have you ever considered authoring a study skills book for students? If you're interested, let me know." And I just remember
what
looking
a
out the
coincidence.
window in absolute, just filled with gratitude, but also feeling very shocked because I never thought that this idea to write a book would eventuate so soon. But again, it was that self belief, but also being surrounded by others that believe in me too. And then taking a lot of the challenges that I experienced, that my community experienced, and turning it into something positive, bringing light into the world. And that can be through digital means, it can also be through written format. And that's where I fell in love with this idea of writing.
That must have been quite of a, it's impressive that you've taken all sorts of mediums to get the message out there, right? And putting the effort, because for everyone out there, including me, we're really grateful, right, for you to do this. And you're explaining it as if it was so easy, yet it's like fulfilling to see that people are willing to do so. in a world where constantly is trying to tell you things or is trying to constantly convince you for the opposite, right? Like having somebody like cares and like gives that care through, tips and a lot of, and mostly the way you digest, because you are a PhD, you've done all your studies, right? And like a lot of all these philosophies and theories behind, you got to digest them for your audience in a very practical way. So that says a lot about the genius behind you, right? Because I think when somebody's extremely specialist in their field, they can explain something in the most simple way and without complications. And the fact that you do that for the audience is something that will stay there forever, right? So the legacy of Jessica Holsman, it's there. And I get to talk to her today, so that's quite of a thing for me itself. I think Jessica, with all that path, we're all whole human beings, right? And having an audience and a community also comes with like pros and cons, mostly pros, right? And have you ever handled? Have you ever actually faced self doubt and criticism towards yourself, especially when you're like in the public eye?
I think being a content creator can be quite challenging because we are always looking at what other people are doing. And so it is very easy to fall victim to self comparison, to let our inner critic get the better of us. And it's that voice in our head that tells us that we should be doing more, that we should be further along, that we're not doing enough. And I've definitely struggled with that in the past. I
Yeah.
have had an incredible business coach that has been able to support me over the years. And I wish that I found him sooner, but I did find him about 4 years ago, and it really made a huge difference to have another person in my corner and to really help me work through some of those negative thoughts that I was having or these unrealistic expectations I was placing on myself. So that was really helpful for me. But I've certainly struggled with that at times. And we're all human. So it always, will pop up from time to time. And it's just about becoming aware when that voice is getting really loud and whether it's being helpful or whether we actually just need to park it on a bench somewhere else and say, you know what, I'm going to continue to focus on my goals. I'm going to continue to take positive action. I know that you're there, but right now, those words are not assisting me. And if you think about how you would talk to a friend, if I think about how I want to talk to my community, it's always about being a positive, empowering source of support. And so, don't I owe that to myself? And it's taken me a long time to get to this point, and also just being really mindful of the sort of content I'm consuming online. Am I consuming content that's making me feel good? Or is it making me feel bad and it's facilitating feelings of self comparison? So, even as someone that works on social media, I have to be mindful and really intentional with the content that I am consuming. So at times, it's definitely been challenging. But again, if I come back to the intention behind why I'm doing what I'm doing, and the more years that I do it, I can then look back and say, you know what, everything's always worked out. Even in those challenging times, it's always worked out. So the next time that I face another obstacle, I can have a greater level of faith. That gives me a lot of comfort.
Very well said. I think I will apply that to myself. Now, switch a little bit the subject here, Jessica. The world of content creation is right now blooming and growing, and I think humanity is kind of like we're about 7 billion people on this planet, and there's a lot of things going on. Mostly from a professional perspective, like I've seen in the tech space, at least a lot of layoffs happening. A lot of hiring during COVID, and yet it's very interesting to imagine how a professional career for somebody would look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, with the uprising situation with AI, which has both sides of it in terms of helping people, and challenging their productivity. So, but mostly from the content creation perspective, like there's YouTube right now and there's other social media platforms. From a person who has had right now an audience and a success, how do you feel about those platforms? What is there missing for professionals like you that own this community? What you would like to see, and yet tech is not offering it.
I love talking about AI. I think it's incredible. And as you said, it can definitely be there to facilitate greater creativity and make our work so much more seamless. And I'm sure that within a year from now, 5 years from now, the content creation landscape is going to look very different. The way that we go about our work is going to change. And I hope that it changes in a way that it allows us to work smarter and not harder, and to really focus on our creativity. So, the sort of things that it can be doing for us, it's just about saving us time and maybe even opening up additional avenues of self expression and being able to connect with others and being creative in new formats. But if I think about the current landscape of social media platforms, I do think that they will need to change with the times. And I do believe that they will. When I look at platforms like YouTube, I think it's a wonderful place for us to be able to share our content. But I also think that there are other ways of doing it now. If I think about the last 3 web series that I put together over the years, I now wonder if there's perhaps other ways of putting it out into the world and other ways of people consuming it. My other concern with social media, especially when we talk about short form content, though, is that we put in all of this work into our content and it really just gets lost along the way because we really only see what is the most recent work that someone's put out there on their main feed. And again, that's where I do think at least we have, for example, dedicated playlists on YouTube. So we can save our videos and have them displayed at the top of our channel page, but that's really about it. And so I'm interested to see where the landscape is going to go and how not only the way we make our content will change, but perhaps even the way that we put out our content into the world will change.
So if you could, like, for all those aspiring creators out there, what's your piece of unconventional advice you would give them?
Oh, good question. Advice I would give aspiring creators at the moment. I think the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the importance of always making sure that whatever content you create adds value for your audience. And it's something that you're passionate about and that you can be personally invested in, because the landscape is always changing. The algorithm is always changing. There's always a demand for more content and more content. And so, if we have a connection to what we're putting out there for ourselves and also with our community, I think that that is what will help to create a long standing digital brand. We're not just aiming for viral videos. And I think that a lot of people at the moment are just trying to put out content that gets the views and they're missing the point. It is about being in it for the long game. I've been on social media for 10 years. And it's about creating something that lasts, that changes as the landscape changes, that can diversify, that can bring you opportunities to create more than just your videos, whether it's a product line or books or merch or movies or web series, getting into public speaking, a podcast, anything. You really need that strong foundation in order to do that. And that means really connecting with your audience. And the only way we can do that is by offering real value. So I think that that would be the one thing that I would be telling aspiring creators at the moment, because otherwise I fear that people will just give up too soon, that they might be in it for the wrong reasons, or they might have unrealistic expectations for how their online journey is going to go. And so I want to be really realistic here and say it takes time, it takes commitment, and it takes consistent positive action, as do any of our goals in life.
So now I'll go with something which is, I would like to turn this conversation a little more fun, as if you and I would just be out there for a coffee and forgetting about this, business and tips, and dive a little bit into fun questions, such, for me, like, I always was curious. The point of, like, if you ever could have a dinner with somebody, dead or alive, who would that be, and what you will be talking about?
Oh my goodness. See, I know that people ask this question a lot, but I have never been asked it, and I've
Exactly.
never thought about what my answer would be. If I could have dinner with anybody in the world, do you know what? It's a
Yeah.
really hard choice. I think what comes to mind would be one of my favorite authors, dead or alive, one of my favorite authors. I am a real self development junkie. They are the books that I read. I never used to read when I was younger. My mum used to buy me fashion magazines, hoping as I would flip through the pages and look at the styles of whatever was in fashion at that time, I might read a few paragraphs. But then I stumbled upon this world of self development, and it's changed my life and it's inspired a lot of the content that I do. And now I'm essentially a self development writer. My latest book, Work Life Balance Survival Guide, is in self development. So I would say one of my favorite authors. And for me, that would be either Gabrielle Bernstein or Eckhart Tolle.
Those are, like, if I need to have that question in reverse, like, I think me being part of that dinner and listening to that conversation would be definitely something really interesting. Maybe AI at some point will create this thing for us, like, where we, like, sit down with these fictional people and have a dinner with, like, we never know where is it going, but definitely, like, sounds quite of an experience. I would love to hear to that conversation for sure.
Amazing, amazing. You'll have to come along if I ever get the chance to have dinner with either of them. I'll invite you along. We'll conference call you in.
Yeah. Now, like, it says a lot about, like, what would be the place that you charge the most when you have to step back from work and life itself? Where do you feel that, like, that's the place you recharge, like, gain energy? What exactly is that activity that you have to do to get back to the true Jessica Holsman?
Whenever I feel overstimulated or just out of alignment, really stressed, not centered, I find what really works for me is I will either go to this beautiful botanical gardens around the corner from my place and just walk around by myself, no music, no phone, no nothing, and just reconnect with nature. I feel I need to build in stillness into my days and weeks in order to de-stress and just reconnect and reground so that I can be my best self and fill up my cup so that I can pour into others. That, or also the beach, I find that can be really relaxing as well. Again, either one, I wouldn't have a preference over it, but I do feel that getting out into nature and just having that moment of stillness really helps to re energize myself and just to feel rejuvenated and fresh to get back into my life.
That's good to know. Knowing that, like, side of Jessica Holzman, it's definitely, at least for me, those are my personal questions that I would have made you over first coffee. So we're running out of time, Jessica, and I do have a few questions that just to wrap up our conversation here, which you've been so grateful to share with us, like, very nice feedback on your career. And maybe what I think will be interesting to end with is knowing a little bit about any upcoming project that you're most excited about, something that keeps you right now, awake and, always with that spark that you have today with us in this podcast.
I love that you're asking me this question right now because last night I barely slept because I had another wave of inspiration and I was getting out of bed at almost midnight to write some ideas down in my notepad. But at the moment, I'm really excited about creating some new content for my YouTube channel. I actually haven't posted much long form content in a while. I had been focusing more on my shorter form content and just experimenting with different formats and different styles, whether it was more podcast looking content or whether it was speaking straight to camera. I used to film a lot of content with B-roll footage. And so I'm just trying to find what sort of content feels right for me now at this point in my life and how I want to put that out into the world. And so I had this idea to completely restyle my filming setup and what I want that to look like. And I was pinning different photos on Pinterest and writing down different video ideas as well. So I feel really inspired now to create more content. And I find that my waves of inspiration, they come in these bursts, in these waves. I will have months of the year where I'm creating a lot of content and then editing. And then there are months where I might be focused on other projects or work's a little bit more quiet and I enjoy that downtime. So I'm definitely in a more active, inspired place at the moment, which feels really great and feels really energizing. And then the other thing I've been focusing on lately, which I think my younger self would be shocked hearing me say it now, but is public speaking. I really love to
Oh,
be able to connect with people in person. And I think after 10 years of doing everything digitally, I not only started to feel more confident and find my voice and get clear on my stories and my messaging, but I also realized that I wanted to be able to speak with people face to face and connect with them. And it was something that I was really longing for and something that we don't, as creators, get to experience very often. And so I've been doing some public speaking and going into schools and different corporate events and really loving that too. And just finding it a nice challenge, something fresh, something new. So I always feel like every year in my career, there's a new focus. And this year, that seems to be the focus. And I'm really excited to see what next year's focus will be as well, because it's always changing. And that's also what keeps it fresh and keeps me engaged and inspired. Because, like I said, when you're doing the same thing for 10 years, you've got to find ways of keeping that momentum going.
yeah. Now you said this about and finding yourself. What's that piece of advice that somebody gave you and it echoes most of the times in your mind?
Piece of advice I received regarding public speaking or regarding life in general?
Life in general, I would say.
Life in general, the best piece of advice I've received. Oh, there must be quite a few. One thing that my business coach told me a few years back, and this is when I was really struggling with burnout, and I think that my inner critic was very loud. So I felt like I was never doing enough and I needed to be doing more and I needed to be further along. And he said to me, "You're a human being, not a human doing." And it really helped me to see the value in rest when it comes to our overall productivity. And that definitely inspired my second book as well, because I think that students and young professionals are very prone to burnout and experiencing brain fog because we're so hard on ourselves. And so, if we remember to be a little bit kinder to ourselves and take a break and realize that studying for longer or working longer hours doesn't necessarily mean a better result, then we can start to work smarter and also go about our life with a greater level of intention and not be prone to burnout and getting sick, and to experience this journey, our career journey and our journey of life, in a more self-compassionate way.
We are human beings, not human doings. Jessica, I mean, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this, wisdom for such a young person like you. You feel like kind of being an old soul at times in these conversations. I mean, your insights on productivity and well-being have been really, truly inspiring. And hearing about your work and the impact you've made, it's been very fulfilling for me. And to our listeners, please don't forget to check out Jessica's content on Study with Jess and her books for most invaluable tips. I think that's where like the real diving starts, right, Jessica? on productivity and well-being?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Check out my books. There's the High School Survival Guide, which is more for students in high school, how to study smarter and not harder. But my more recent book, Work Life Balance Survival Guide, is definitely my guide for productivity, work life balance, and just living a more intentional life. But thank you so much for having me, because this has just been such a wonderful experience. And I'm so grateful that I could share a bit about my journey and share some of my own life lessons. And I really hope that everyone can take something from it, and that it gives them just a little bit more calm in their days, and just a little bit more confidence to go out and pursue their goals as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.